Alright, the similarities and differences of company culture. The two companies that we're looking at today are going to be the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the People's Armed Force. That's the Chinese police force. That's going to be the most similar to the FBI. If you go to the FBI's brief history, you'll find out that it's established in 1908. And their motto to begin with is going to be to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States. Aside from that, the Chinese armies here are going to be broken down into separate pieces. Those pieces are all going to be collectively known as the People's Armed Police. Each section is a little bit different. There's no one section that is explicitly like the FBI, but in total, they're set up to protect the Chinese people. And that was established in 1983. This information was found on the Global Security website that explains the different branches of the People's Armed Police and what each branch does. Now, we're going to be looking at the difference in the cultures. So the cultural definition was taken from a possible design model of the organizational culture, since we are looking at the organization's culture and how each one is different for the separate countries. It's defined as a concept that summarizes the collective standards, such as like norms or thinking and attitudes of an organization, and it's composed of visible elements like behaviors or non or less visible elements such as values or specific standards. The social cultural differences that we'll be looking at today is going to be the social customs, which are going to be the types of greetings and acceptable gifts to give in an organization, high-low context, which is going to be the verbal versus nonverbal cues, and the tolerance for conflict, so how disagreements are handled within an organization. The differences between them, you'll be able to see that the United States does things differently than China does. The first one is going to be the social customs. So for here, it's very obvious that you walk up to someone and you shake their hand and tell them your name, and you go on from there. If you were to be someone in an organization and one of your clients comes up to you and wants to give you box seats for an Astros game, you have to politely say no and go on with your day because you're not allowed to accept a gift. Most organizations have rules against accepting gifts or gifts that are over a certain amount of money. And in China, they may do a handshake. It's becoming more common to give out handshakes, but the more formal way is to nod or bow to the person that you are greeting. And there it is a lot more acceptable to give a big gift or a gift with a large price tag on it. And it's just considered something that is given as a thanks or something that shows your appreciation of that person. The next is the high-low context. Remember that a high context are more subtle nonverbal cues, and a low context is going to be very informal and more verbal. In the United States, we're considered more low context because we use expressions and we use our words to convey our thoughts and feelings, our ideas to those in our organization. So if you were to have an idea, you would tell your boss that you had such idea, and they would give you feedback, and you would have that conversation between the two of you. Now, as in China, it's more of a high context, which means they rely on the subtle or even nonverbal cues. So they're more about saving face and keeping the harmony. If you were to come up into a meeting and give an idea, they would subtly, nod their head and say, okay, I will take that into consideration, even though they may hate the idea, just to save face and not embarrass you in front of someone. The next is going to be the tolerance for conflict. In the United States, you're going to find that we are a lot more tolerant for conflict. They're going to let you duke out whatever argument you're having and solve it on whatever level you feel is appropriate. So you could have that conversation with your boss and argue whatever points, and that will be okay. Now, in China, they're going to be less tolerant for that conflict. They're going to expect you to save face in the meeting. You're having a meeting, your boss is there, the rest of the department is there, your boss says something, instead of challenging them on that subject, you would say okay and move on to the next point of the meeting, because you want to save that face and keep the harmony without causing too much conflict. So in conclusion, the FBI and PAP are similar organizations, but they also differ in their business cultures because the society that they are found in have different customs. So the social customs, the high or low context, and tolerance for conflict are all examples of why these organizations are different. Not saying one is better than the other, just that they have a difference in the way that they're run. And these would be all of the sources that I used. One of them is the Communicating at Work, Strategies for Success in Business in the Professions. The other is a Possible Design Model of the Organization and Culture. There's also the Global Security website that describes the Chinese police force. And then the U.S. Department of Justice also puts out the Federal Bureau of Investigations guidelines and their mission.